Hi, I'm Mara Webster with Ig Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning into one of our talks today. We are a year-round talk series bringing you the best creative voices across film, television, theater, and entertainment. And today we are so lucky to be joined by Reggie Lee, who you may recognize from his starring turn in CBS's All Rise. But actually, I wanted to talk a little bit about your behind-the-scenes work in producing and development, because you've been producing this series and developing it over the last several months, conception.
Yeah.
And there was something that you've talked about in terms of how at the beginning of the pandemic, when everything shut down, that it kind of felt like a little bit of a vacation at the beginning. And then the trickiness was, how do I make myself productive in the way that I need to be when everything's at a little bit of a standstill? And that you really had to create a little bit of a regiment for yourself. And so in the journey of developing and producing this show, I was interested in how that fit into the structure that you ended up finding for yourself.
Wow, Mara, you've done your homework. That's crazy. Although that's probably everybody, right? That's probably everyone in COVID is like a little bit of a vacation and then what's happening? Um, yeah, structure, at first it was like a vacation, and producing had always kind of been on my radar in terms of wanting to do something. I think I tried my hand at writing once, and it's not my jam, but and directing is an interesting thing, something I'd like to do in the future. But television directing is so interesting in that you don't get the freedom almost, because the series is already kind of set up for you, and you work within those particular parameters. But the producing aspect, especially being a minority, was kind of thrilling to me, and I didn't know how thrilling it would be at the beginning. But I had these guys, these two Filipino guys, and I was doing a panel, and it was a bunch of It's like 4 or 5 Filipino American actors, and these guys that kind of put the panel together came up to me and said, "Hey, would you take a look at this script? We have the script we've been working on. Would love to share it with you." And at that time, it was called Lolo Pepe. Lolo in Tagalog, or in the Filipino language, means kind of like grandfather. So and it was this, I read it and they said, "We'd love for you to do a role in it." And I read it and I thought, wow, this is a really fantastic. And we've all seen a lot of scripts because we read them day to day to audition or work or whatever, but you kind of know what you feel viscerally is going to work, and having been through the studio system and the streaming now, especially with all these things that they're taking chances on. And so I said, I really love this, and I love the role that you have in mind for me, but I'd like a hand in maybe producing this with you guys. And they were taken aback, and they were like, "What? Yeah, we never even thought about that." I thought, I barely thought about it until now. And so I ended up bringing it to. I was on a series called Grimm for years on NBC, and I brought it to some producers over there, and some liked it, some, but there was one that said, this is really, really wonderful, and what they loved most about it was the familial aspect of it and how it kind of relates to everybody, humanity in general. But it is about, it's set in 2 time periods. It's in the 1990s during the riots and present day. And it is about a family from the Philippines, obviously, but some of them have been here for a while. But it's about making their way through society, having to do what they need to do, which you'd never expect, but retaining this kind of familial bond within something that might or might not be lawful. So it's a wonderful. It's what we call it is Narcos meets Godfather 2. And we're now in the stages of really, pitching this project, getting it out to studios, getting it out to pods, and it's gotten a great reception. So we're hoping soon. And I've spoken to. I'm really great friends with what we'd like is kind of a co-production with the Philippines and really involve them. But one of the most wonderful stars of the Philippines that I've become friends with is Sharon Cuneta, who is what they call the megastar of the Philippines. She's kind of like, the Barbra Streisand and the Meryl Streep of the Philippines rolled into one. And she's just lovely. And so we're hoping to get her on this project, and we've spoken about it, and she's very interested. So, the ball is rolling. It's exciting it's a time that I think for all of us, and not just minorities, for all of us to kind of figure out what is the gift that COVID has given us, in terms of the positives. And there are so many positives amidst all the negatives. And that's one of them, is really kind of digging in, because there's no, unless you take action, it doesn't really happen. And I've always dreamed of producing something, and I've been in this business for so long that it's like, yeah, maybe now is the time that we're locked in for a year and a half. So here we are.
Well, it also sounds like the perfect project to make that jump as well for you. I can't wait to see it when it eventually hits screens. And I wanted to then jump into talking about your work on All Rise, because you've had such a fantastic trajectory. It's, when you step back and look at it, because you weren't actually first on the show for the pilot, but you came in episode 2 and spent the first season recurring and have now been up to a series regular. And so with that in mind, I was really interested in when you first stepped into the world, because people had already had a little bit of a chance to start figuring out the rhythms of what this ensemble piece was going to look like and what those elements would be, and the world that these characters exist in. So you kind of had to come and step into a world that was partly formed but not fully formed. And then because you weren't in as many scenes yet, there was also the challenge of how do you bring forth a fully fledged character and all of the details of his life outside of those scenes into those moments, which now you have more of an opportunity to flesh out. So how was that journey with those challenges in mind when you stepped in the first season, and the way that it's then evolved into working on this season?
Fortunately, I was, I came in pretty early on, so it's not like I was jumping into a series that had been going for a year and a half or whatnot. So, although there was what you recognize is there's kind of a familial bond between the series regulars, but this group of people, they really were very incredibly welcoming. From the cast members, they're just so open and familiar. A lot of them come from theater. So, Ruthie Ann, I knew from theater. Lindsay Mendez, I knew from theater. So having that kind of thing where, in a show, you're kind of like family. So they had that kind of vibe already. And so they were already joking with me by the time I got in there. Oddly enough, we never got to work together as much because I was always in the DA's office. So I was always with Wilson Bethel, and now Jay Alex is in there, and Audrey Corsa is in there. Thank God, But it was establishing this character always. From the first day, you kind of look at the text and the material, and you go, who am I? And assessing from like very little text or very little material. I kind of did that with Grimm as well. I pulled Sergeant Wu out of one line that he had in the pilot, and it just kept running that direction. Same thing with this, it was like, and speaking to the showrunner and the director and going, let's start him here. I said, is he really strict? Is he really this? Is he really that? Is he nice? But there was a point where it was like, yes, he is the boss. He is the boss. You got to own that leadership, yet you care. And that was the aspect that when Greg Spottiswoode gave that piece to me, and I was like, oh, he's not an ass. He's a guy who really wants to keep this machine well-oiled and going, while all these new DAs are coming in with different ways of solving cases and kind of differing opinions to what I would deem justice. So going in there and doing that, and then little by little, I had 2 kids and a wife, and I was being held up in a courtroom, and I was being taken hostage, and I was crying about my kids and please don't shoot me. And these things evolve, but as you go with anything, I think, even from a pilot well, with a pilot, you have more time to work on it, right? You've got like several weeks or 3 weeks to work on it. So you have time to form these things. But I think with writers, as much as they have the arc for the season, and I knew this with Grimm as well, is the lovely thing is they wrote accordingly with the characters. So it would go episode by episode. And there were some things that you never thought would happen, at the end of a season, at the beginning of a season, because of the evolution of that particular character. So I enjoyed that a lot, because the way I'm treating Jay Alex on this show, Luke, who plays Luke, is very different from the way I'm treating Wilson Bethel and Mark Callan. You know, Luke is more of a, like, I'm his mentor. And I love that aspect, because for an entire season, I was just yelling at Mark Callan, you know, so and to be in the courtroom, that's a whole, when I first got in the courtroom, I was like, whoa, you know, questioning someone on the witness stand, because it just feels so like you've never done that. I've never done that before in my whole entire life. So how do I, this guy who has all this kind of feeling of bravado and power and leadership and is an amazing head district attorney, how do I manifest that? You know, but that was the joy of it. You know, that's the real joy of what we do. And which is why, which brings me to, I love that you guys are doing this, because it's really a gift to the industry, and us feeling like we can connect to other people in the industry whilst in lockdown. So you guys are doing an amazing thing.
Thank you for that. I
Sure.
actually wanted to touch upon the mentorship aspect of him that you brought up, because I think that's been one of the beautiful things that you've had the opportunity to explore with him as a character this season. And I was curious about where you saw the genesis of that coming from for him. If it's something where, you know, do you think of him as a character who had mentorship himself in his career as he was coming up through the ranks? Or do you think of him more as someone who wished that he had that, and that's part of the reason that he really wants to create that for other people in the room?
Choice B.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it was, you know, I think that that's kind of what, again, not really knowing what his background is and what all that is, or what Luke's background is, but I can just imagine from a monologue that a scene that we had in which he talks about, you know, if just one person listened to them, maybe they'd have a shot. But the system just goes about doing what they need to do because that's what the system is, you know. So it's how do we not question that in terms of humanity? So hearing that, I had just gone, man, I feel like you've gone through the same thing, and you wouldn't be so passionate about it if you hadn't, in some way, shape, or form. And I think in some way, shape, or form, many of us who go through this business are kind of like that, you know, or even a minority in this business. It's because it's like, especially me, it's like, you know, an Asian in Ohio with a physician as a dad is not going to go, yeah, absolutely, go be an actor, it's the best thing ever, you know. So to have that with him is, I felt like a real chance to, it was almost like a father-son moment, you know, and I enjoyed that so much. And as a matter of fact, you know, even that aspect of it, I felt so much, especially with everything going on right now in terms of movements and Black Lives Matter and whatnot, just minority to minority, I felt a real bond with him. And in that regard, I was like, I so want, it's like that feeling like you want a child, you know, because you want that person to be able to connect with on that level. So that's long-winded answer, but that's where I'm working from.
Well, with all of that in mind as well, in his experience in this industry within the legal system, do you also find that that's the precipice of a lot of the reason why he is very strict, why he is such a rule follower, because the expectations that have been placed on him have been very different. He's always had to work twice as hard and do twice as well as everybody else in the room around him.
Yeah, absolutely. So many parallels to the regular life of actor, you know, and that absolutely. I mean, being put in kind of a leadership position is, it's almost like, you know, a blessing and a curse, because to find the balance between who you are and what you have to do in order to manage the situation is kind of the craft of the entire thing, which I enjoy. You know, fortunately, it's written out for me in lines, but what goes on behind that is the joy of it all. Yeah, I mean, you know, I've got this new DA that's in town that wants things done a certain way. In terms of how they've always described Thomas Choi, the character that I play, is just, he is like by the book law. Justice, justice, justice. He'll do it in a caring way, but the end result must be this. So to have these people press his buttons, with Luke in particular, kind of hit more of a personal note and a very visceral button, I'm sure will take me in weird directions the rest of the season. But I welcome that. Whatever. It's like, wait a minute, is he starting to think that that might work, and is that gonna shake things up? Is he gonna keep going? Is he, how I see these characters being hit by, and which is the joy kind of this show, and how well written it is, because the way they get hit emotionally by all these cases. And I know, I mean, I've interestingly enough, I'm going to go on a tangent right now, because I once went to, a friend of mine had he was, I don't know if it was a swearing in, or it was some kind of trial, and his attorney came in, and she was just like rushing through the day. She's got her little, like, it's like this huge briefcase chugging along. It is not glamorous at all. I mean, it is full on, like, they get down to work. They've got about 4 or 5 other cases after this, and they got to get going. So, to kind of come in here and kind of see the internal workings of each particular character and enjoy it is really wonderful. So yeah, it has been a joy to kind of balance the leadership with the passion of this character.
And do you find that the journey to his decision making and where he lands up is a little bit different to other characters that you've worked with? Because it's not just a case of him sitting there and going, I think this is the right answer, this is what I would personally do. He's really got to take so many other elements and things into consideration. And as a character, he's also someone who wants to know every single one of those details and consider all of the different facets and the different directions that something could go in before he lands on kind of what he feels morally is the right thing. And it might not even be personally what he thinks he would do in a situation as well. So do you find that the journey of decision making and motivating factors for him as a character is a little bit different process wise for you?
Oh, for sure. For sure. I mean, it's, again, to take the leadership aspect and the management position into consideration, and what any manager does of any particular business or whatever. I mean, you can't just work on emotion. You can't just work on, like, which some of these guys do. And kind of, I think what works with this show is taking, down to Lola Carmichael or up to Lola Carmichael, and how she uses her feelings to kind of find what is justice. What is it for that? Well, for me, it's about, I've got to balance justice with you and your job and what you bring to the table. And are you good for the DA system? Are you not good for the DA system? Because you question it so much. Might you be better in private practice? Might you, to see all that and to see what works within the entire scope of the office versus just that one lawyer is gonna help me determine where you are in this puzzle. So, and also the fact that I do care personally, deeply, for probably each one of these guys that has been brought on and hired, so it's that, and maybe not even showing that particular face, because I can't, because how much of my guard do I let down in order to be able to say, no, you got to do this. You have to take this person down. I know you feel for them and I know you relate to them, but here's what they did. Here's what needs to happen, because the DA will be on my case if it doesn't happen. So to balance that down to how many years should we put this person away from for, maybe I'm that, it's so many crazy things, but I love it. It's everything you can assess within like 2 days of getting the script. It's like, what's happening? You sit down immediately, go, what's happening? Television works so fast. So, it's, fortunately, the writing is really wonderful. And they're always amenable to, Greg Spottiswoode is always like, just email us questions or whatever and let us know and we'll get back to you. And it's really great, that we can do that. And there's a back and forth, because that's not always the case.
Yeah. And with that idea of the fact that he does have to have a face up, that he can't always show everything that he's thinking and feeling. And, with any procedural, there's always those moments where there's legalese delivery that's necessary to drive the plot forward, but isn't, there's sometimes a couple of lines that maybe aren't about character. And this show does a really good job at still weaving character within a lot of those procedural elements throughout. But what are the challenges in finding your performance in a lot of those moments where either it's the lines that you've got to deliver to move that forward, or the fact that he's got to kind of cover up exactly what it is that's going on internally?
Well, both of those, and it's such a wonderful question because both of those tie into preparation. I mean, truly, these things, as experienced as this particular character is, and most characters in procedurals, it has to roll off your tongue. It cannot be like you're thinking about it for the first time. It has to have been there for years and years and years. I used to always marvel at Gillian Anderson on X-Files. Those things would just roll off her tongue, and I loved it so much. And that's kind of this particular thing, again, with preparation. And my process is pretty intense and time consuming, because I feel like there has to be a real essence of freedom once you get in the scene, and you have to be free as a bird. But that freedom comes with the cost of doing your homework. So doing my homework and having that roll off my tongue is a huge part of it, because it like anything. And that also ties into Thomas Troy, because Thomas Troy is, I mean, he's a badass lawyer. So it's that kind of thing has to just be there. It's kind of like on top of your skin. It's just very visceral. So the preparation for that is incredibly key. Now, there's not always time for that much preparation. So therein lies the rub, where it's like, even when you only have, a couple hours or a night or whatever, you can't, Wilson and I were talking about this. He's like, worst thing you want to do is look like you're trying to remember your lines. And it just can't be that, you have to trust. I really do trust in that. And then I've learned as I get older. When I was younger, I was like, oh God, I just screwed that up. But I've learned, I'm like, listen, if it's not rolling off the tongue, it's not Thomas Troy. So can we do another one? I'd like another one. And I've always been, I'm that guy. I'm like, can I have another take? And there are times I've learned many times to just let it go, because I feel like their judgment is really great, but it's got to roll off. So, but with all the stuff behind it.
And beyond the pacing of the actual filming of the show that you were just mentioning, there's such a pacing to a lot of the delivery as well. I know that Greg Spottiswoode has joked with you and a lot of the other cast about, you'd better say it twice as fast if you want to make sure it's going to make it into the final cut.
How do you know this? How do you know all this? Wow. Yes.
But how does that really inform a lot of the delivery and the dynamic that you and the other cast have to create when you're filming scenes together?
I mean, again, it starts, it's interesting, from doing now a virtual table read to getting on set and getting the rhythm of the show. And I think Greg puts it in a really great way. It's like these people, and these people are busy, they are smart, they know exactly what they're going to say. And it's like saying something as it comes to you versus thinking about it and then saying something, so it does change. I mean, I love more than anything, times when we overlap so many times, and we'll come in and overlap, and then of course it's like, okay, now let's do one without overlapping, because now we've got to get the entire sound and all that stuff. But when we overlap, that's kind of the real world, so it affects the pacing. We all know it. I mean, as people have been on the show, and there are many, this is truly an ensemble piece, so everyone holds their own weight. Series regular, recurring, whatever. It's everyone knows the show so well. And yes, I mean, they give you it's like 67 pages, 66 pages. So it's, a normal TV show is what, like maybe 40 minutes, 42 minutes.
Yeah. And
it's usually a page a minute. So you better talk fast. So it's, it is, but it is written that way. And I love it. At first it was tough. It was really tough, because it was really, but now we've gotten so used to it. And again, I think with anything, when you're thinking about it, it becomes so much more effortful. If you're not thinking about it as much, it becomes effortless. So that's the key. And it's tough to get to that psychological point, but we do.
And obviously, every single show that's shooting at the moment, you've had to completely reimagine structure, and your show in particular, like the protocols in place are so clear, from the mask wearing. There's never actors taking a mask down because it looks better on camera for delivery. There's plexiglass round every single corner of that set, it looks like. And even, in seeing the way a lot of the shots are filmed, where there's not two actors in a two shot, it's singular coverage. But when it comes to connections that you're creating in scenes, that creates a very different challenge in the way that you're interacting with scene partners. Even just physically not being able to stand as close to someone as you normally would for a conversation creates a very different dynamic. So how has that really shifted the way that you've had to think about scenes? And then also, especially for guest stars and other recurring actors that are coming into the show, how you're building dynamics with new people coming into this space with all of that in mind as well?
It's when we first went back with the masks, it was just so clear how much we rely on this part of the face when we're reading someone's emotions, or it's like, well, you just can't. You read words, you read lips, you read all of the above. It's just like it's not available to you. You now have to read eyes. So it was a challenge. But the thing is, we've kind of been doing it for a little while outside here, where you're kind of listening. It's almost like your listening becomes more in tune, because you can't really see expression on that side of the face. So that was imperative. And we were joking at first, because it was like, you guys act bigger, because, you can't tell. You can't tell, because so much of TV is close up and subtlety and real life. I mean, it's like this. So, many times you can't tell. And it really, but again, the letting go of it and kind of feeling like it was, and the joy of this is that we are living in a pandemic and the show is set in a pandemic. So to have had the practice outside and to go in and already kind of be there. Now, if it was new and they were like filming and it was just, there was no pandemic, God, I wish that would happen. There was no pandemic, and that was either we're doing it within the storyline, it'd be different, because it would really be like there was no practice there. But for now, we've had that. So, but it's such a difference when, my entire desk is plexiglass, and it's great because it's like immediately, whenever I have a scene that is, in a plexiglass, there's relaxation that happens because you feel incredibly safe. And you can see someone because you can take off your masks. So they have taken such great care. Mike Robin, who is the exec producer and one of the most amazing directors on the show, it kind of helped put all these protocols in place. And boy, they are on it. So when I say that, for instance, maybe if we do a reshoot or something because the network wanted no masks, it is for sure that, because obviously you'll film it with masks and you're a little bit closer together. Maybe they want to see the expression, maybe they want to see stuff. So we'll stage it in the same way, but it'll be much farther from each other, and it'll be like me behind plexiglass. So the joys of it are that probably the most one-on-one scenes have been done without masks, because there's time to kind of configure it. But I'm not doing a love scene, so yet. I don't know how that works out. I'm like, wow, talk about you cannot use a mask there. That has to be really intense. But the testing is on point.
Yeah. Well, I love everything that you've done with this character so far in the show, and can't wait to watch all the places that you continue to take him throughout the series. And thank you so much, Reggie.
Thank you, Mara. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it so much.